Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, House Bill 1177, the companion to my Senate Bill 506, provides protections when leaving provides Texans protections when leaving their homes during a disaster. Currently, it's illegal to carry handguns without a license to carry. This puts those in disaster areas in a challenging position where they can choose to stay in the disaster area or leave for safety. However, if they do not have a license to carry, they may be putting themselves at risk by leaving their homes without personal firearm protection, not to mention those being some of the most valuable items that they own in their possession. Also, they would be leaving their firearms vulnerable to looters. To address this predicament, House Bill 1177 would allow Texans to temporarily transport their handguns when evacuating from a disaster area. This will allow them to keep their valuable possessions and to get to a safe area during threatening times. I'd like to thank Chairwoman Huffman and her staff for working with me on a committee substitute to offer today. Yep.
Senator Creighton sends up the committee substitute.
Committee substitute would make this exemption only applicable during a mandatory evacuation order and the subsequent 48 hours following. The substitute would also give the governor authority to extend this time period if needed. The individual in this scenario would have the opportunity to carry the firearm concealed, and this would not apply to those prohibited by state and federal law to possess a firearm. And thank you, Madam Chair and members, for your consideration.
Thank you, Senator Creighton. Do we have any questions of Senator Creighton at this time? Okay, we'll open public testimony on the committee substitute to House Bill 1177.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. I am Rick Briscoe, appearing on behalf of Open Carry Texas in support of this much-needed legislation. There are a couple of potential issues with it that I foresee, though. The bill addresses disasters, and there are also emergencies with limited mandatory evacuations, such as the recent chemical fires in Houston, where smaller areas were evacuated, where the same risks are involved of looting and so on. We would urge inclusion of emergencies as well as disasters involving mandatory evacuations. The other area of concern is the designation of shelters. In our experience, individuals took persons evacuating an area into their homes, and they surely are unlikely to meet the definition proposed in the bill. There are non-governmental organizations, churches, businesses, all kinds of people who stepped up during Harvey to provide a place for people to stay. We see some issues there too. During Harvey at the Brown Center, the Houston police violated both federal and state law in seizing firearms and conducting warrantless searches. There's video from the local TV stations of these poor people with all their worldly possessions in a clear plastic bag and the police rummaging through it. I question how well law enforcement will carry out the intent of the legislature on this bill, which makes it all the more needed. And we'd be pleased to discuss the matter with anyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to this panel. Thanks for being here. We'll call up the next panel. Mr. Grisham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, my name is CJ Grisham. I'm here testifying for this bill on behalf of myself and Open Carry Texas. I'd like to thank the Texas legislature for recognizing that the right of the people to keep and bear arms in self-defense still exists, if even to just a minor degree. It's a shame that under this bill we must first lose everything before we gain an essential, fundamental, and inalienable right to self-defense. It's humbling to know that our legislators, who took an oath to support and defend the Constitution, care so much about these liberties that it will graciously extend these protections to people who are dealing with the worst times of their lives so that they can defend themselves without having to jump through hoops and perform circus tricks. Currently, 36 states require or recognize the right of the people to keep and bear arms without a government permission slip or license to carry. Of those, 16 states currently allow 100% of the time what this bill purports to do for 48 hours after an emergency. In other words, Texas is one of only 14 states that requires a government permission slip before law-abiding citizens can exercise their right to self-defense, even in a disaster. declaration. Meanwhile, criminals are carrying right now without a license, while honest, peaceful, law-abiding citizens wait for weeks and months for their government to process their lawful self-defense licenses. While we obviously support this bill and any bill that removes unconstitutional restrictions to our right to self-defense, this bill should not even be necessary. By amending this bill to apply to all law-abiding Texans all of the time, we can protect all Texans and not just those who lost everything to a devastating natural disaster. There are several concerns we have as written, as you're aware. There are still areas in Houston that are recovering from Hurricane Harvey 2 years later, not 48 hours later. This bill makes our right to self-defense contingent on a limited time frame and only requires a conscious decision by the governor to extend it. What is it about our politicians that they don't feel they can trust people that voted them into office while 36 other states do? Are Texans less responsible, less accountable, less trained, less trustworthy? Or are we just simply more controlled?
Thank you, sir.